It is time to consider the next pattern for creating objects, the constructor function. The purpose of a constructor function is to create objects of a specific type. And you have already run into them in JavaScript, as there are several constructors that are part of the main JavaScript code. For example, any of the common data types used in JavaScript can be created with a constructor. For many of them, we use the literal syntax, but a constructor is available as well. Just let me give you a couple of examples here. Now, this first example, there's not a literal way to do a date, but whenever we create a date, we use a constructor function that creates a date object for the current date and time. Now, we can do the same thing with an array. Let's say we wanted to assign an array to the ARR variable. We could do it this way. That is a way to create an array. Although we usually do it with the literal syntax, where we just set it equal to square brackets, it is possible to do this with a constructor. And there are multiple other constructors in the main JavaScript code. Now, the first thing I want you to notice about both of these constructors that I used here is the use of the new keyword. That is required when creating an object with a constructor. You have to use the new keyword before the constructor function. So before date and before array, we use new. Now, this is really the key part of a constructor function, and we will get into that in more detail in a little bit. Now, something else to notice is that the constructor functions all start with an uppercase letter. You can see the uppercase D, uppercase A. Now, this is not required. It is just a convention, but one that is strongly recommended. Now, it shouldn't come as a big surprise to you that we can create our own constructor functions. Functions that are set up to be used with the new keyword that will create objects of a particular type. Let's look at that with the same example we used for factory functions. All right, so here I have the initial code we had for the factory function. Just creating a function is really what we're doing here. And then a call to that down here. We're going to modify this so we can set up a constructor function. Now, the first thing I want to do, I just want to change the name of this. I like to use nouns more when I'm creating a constructor function. Just seems to make more sense to me. So meeting room is going to be the name of the function that we're going to turn into a constructor function. Now, the only thing I did differently from what I would do in a factory function is I gave it an uppercase letter for the start of the function name. That is all. Nothing else is different. All right, now inside, let's go ahead and set up that constructor. We use the keyword this quite a bit because this is used to refer to the object that is returned, and so we're assigning properties to that object that is created. So this dot name is equal to the name that is passed in, and this dot capacity is equal to the capacity that is passed in. All right, and then we have this dot available, and we set that equal to true, and then finally this dot schedule, like that. So that's what we need to set up. Now notice I haven't put the method. I have not put the reserve method in here for the same reason. We really didn't want it inside the factory function as well. We want that as a part of the prototype, but we'll deal with that in a little bit. Now, notice down here with my calls, I have the keyword new. That was not required with the factory function, but I have it in here because it is required when using a constructor function. We have to use the keyword new. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at these, see if we create two objects, boardroom and training room A. Let's save that. Let me just a little bit smaller here, and let's display boardroom. There we go. We've got the name, everything set up in there. And then training room A, we have that as well. So we're able to create objects using that constructor function. Now, what if I would have not used the new keyword and I just called meeting room and let's see, let's pass in this, and then a capacity of 60, what would happen? Well, as you can see, we get a type error because cannot set property name of undefined. Something doesn't happen. We don't have anything to assign the name property to. All right. Now, the reason we don't have anything to assign the name property to is because we did not use the keyword new. So it's important to understand what the keyword new does when you're dealing with constructors. So I want to go through the 5 things that the keyword new accomplishes. So let's do that now. So first off, a new object is created in memory. And that's why we were getting that error, because we didn't use the keyword new. There was no new object created to which it could attach a name property and a schedule property, all those properties that we had in there. So that's the first thing it does. The second thing, the new object's prototype pointer is assigned to the constructor's prototype property. So this is going to allow us to set up a prototype, which we will do in the next topic. But we're introducing it here. This little bit here, that new object is going to have its prototype pointer assigned to the prototype property of the constructor. So whatever is set up for that constructor. Now we'll look at this in just a moment when we talk through that code again. But in the next topic, we'll actually be doing the prototype and putting the reserve method in it. All right, number 3 thing it does. The keyword this for the constructor function is assigned to the new object. So this new object that is created can be referred to using the keyword this. And that's why we use this keyword in the code of our constructor. Then the code of the constructor is executed. So anything with this in it gets things assigned to that object. And then finally, if the constructor function doesn't return a value, the object is returned. So we could create a constructor function where we return something ourselves. But if we do that, then this object up here that is created, this new object, will not be returned. So generally we don't. There are a few situations where that sometimes is done, but generally we don't return anything because the constructor function will automatically return this new object that's created. All right, so those are the 5 things that happen with the new keyword. So first thing, a new object is created, and then, as I mentioned, the new object's prototype pointer is assigned the prototype of the constructor, okay? So I want to just show you that second point just a minute here. So if we take a look at one of these rooms that have been created, and I open it up, right here we have a proto property. This is an accessor property that exposes the prototype. And so if we open that up to see what the prototype for this object is, we can see it has something to do with constructor. So it's coming from the constructor. That's where this is coming from. Notice also that the object is of a type meeting room. We can see what it was created from, what constructor it was created from. We see that as well. Now, the third point that I want to point out in the code is that the keyword this refers to that new object. So we have a new object created in memory, and then we can refer to that with this. And so that's why we do this.name equals name, this.capacity equals capacity, and so on. Because we're able to refer to that new object using this. And then notice our function doesn't return anything, so that new object does get returned and placed in these variables there. So when you get down to it, the main difference between a constructor function and a regular function is how it is called with this keyword new. That's the important part. Now, as I mentioned, I left the reserve method out of the constructor because we don't want an individual method on each object. We want to place that on the prototype, so we're not repeating it. So it's just borrowed from the prototype object. All objects created that will point to that prototype and can borrow it. So next we'll look at how we can do that.